Okay, so supported fish is one of my favorite heart openers, especially for you guys that are at desks. So just make sure that when you lay across that one pillow or bolster, or if you have blocks, that it's behind the back of your heart. So you want your heart to be what's lifted, not the lower part of the rib cage, because that's actually going to get you into a pretty big dip in the low back. So you want the low back to be fairly neutral, and then the heart center, kind of the mid-thoracic or even upper thoracic, is going to be lifted. Okay, how does that feel for you?
Really good.
Good, okay. So your feet can be planted. You can extend the legs out. If you want to get into the hips, you can always butterfly the knees out to the side, soles of the feet together. And just wiggle about until you're comfortable. So once you kind of found that place, and you can just start to sink in. So it might take a bit, you might have to shift or move, but eventually you'll just come to that place where your body is ready to rest. And just notice if there's any tension or resistance along the way. And you don't have to try to fix it or change it. You might slightly shift, but know that that's pretty normal in heart openers like this, because we're so used to rounding forward, we're so used to contracting through the muscles of the front body of the chest, that to open them up, we're naturally just going to be a little bit resistant to that change. And so instead of trying to adjust anytime we feel slight discomfort or resistance, is just simply pause where you are and take a couple of deep breaths. And it's almost like you're just leaning into that resistance. That you're allowing yourself to feel whatever's coming up in this moment without trying to control the experience. And some of the poses that we go through today are going to be a little bit more gentle, just because it is a restorative yin. So also give yourself permission to not have to get anywhere or get into a certain type of depth. That there should always be a level of comfort, and that you have a really soft place to land. So now that you've been in this pose for just a couple of minutes, you might start to notice if there's places that you can now soften into, or you can just let your body be a little bit more relaxed. You allow your shoulders to melt away from your ears. Maybe even allow your jaw to be slightly open, bottom teeth away from the top. Allow your eyelids to rest heavy. And then notice the skin around your eyes. If it feels a little bit tense, you almost allow your eyes to fall into the backs of their sockets. And then all of that skin to release. Really subtle shift, but really important one to relax into the face. And bring your attention to your hands, palms facing up. Can you let the backs of your hands rest heavier, almost like they're creating a deeper imprint in towards your mat. Maybe elbows are resting on the ground, or they might be hovering, but that there's this weight that's drawing them closer and closer to the earth with each breath. And as you travel down the body, you can feel the weight of your legs, the backs of your heels or sides of your feet. rooting you in place so that in this moment you can acknowledge that you're grounded. You are supported in this pose. That you don't have to worry about anything outside of the practice for these next 50 or so minutes together. And finally, as we come towards the end of this pose, can you just bring a little bit of attention to your breath? So just start by breathing naturally, but you're just bringing some awareness to how your breath feels today. To how your body moves as you breathe. That there's this expansion, this growing outwards. And then there's this almost retreat back to center, where you let yourself become heavier. And that this steady rhythm repeats over and over again in this really stable pattern. When things around us feel really uncontrollable, feel really chaotic, or just overwhelming, if we have a lot on our plate that day, is just to come back to the breath. And in this moment, know that you are supported, that you have enough, that you don't need anything outside of this practice, and that this is your time. And just to remind yourself of those truths, what's happening right here, right now. That we allow the panic moments, the overthinking to just subside, even when it comes up. That we just simply fall back in tune with this grounding rhythm of breath. And just take about 3 or 4 more breaths to close off this pose. We're gonna add in just a little bit of movement for the head and neck. So just gonna simply begin to draw your chin to opposite shoulders, over to the right and then to the left. So you're feeling maybe a bit of a massage for the back of the head, but also some length for the sides of the neck into your SCM and the scalenes. If you want to make this a little bit deeper, you can always reach through your fingertips. Just taking the last couple of breaths to just flush out any stickiness in the tops of the shoulders or the neck. And then when you feel ready to be done with movement, you can bring your chin back up through center. I always like to plant my feet just to feel a little bit more sturdy to come out of this. So you can bend into your knees, plant your feet, and then just slowly begin to draw your hands over top of your body. And you'll roll yourself over to the side. And then if your props are still beneath you, you can just press them out from under and just land into a fetal position. Okay. So that your head is cradled into your right bicep or arm. Body is resting heavy. And feel how your spine is starting to neutralize. So from that really big opening of your chest and your heart center, this pose is a little bit more safe. It's a little bit more internal, that we're starting to close in towards the body. And it's just a reset from that big expansion and opening to come back to center. Now, especially after a big, long heart opener like that, I always like to bring some space into the low back. So a couple of options. You're gonna slowly roll yourself back onto your mat so your spine is connected. Okay, supported bridge. So you can use, I would use a firm pillow if you have one underneath the backs of your hips. Otherwise, you can roll up a pillow, and basically you just want to support so that your hips are a little bit lifted. Okay, so whether that's really low, like this variation with the pillow, or it's a little bit higher, you can also stack a bunch of pillows. Can be nice. Okay, but you'll pick up your hips to slide that underneath. Okay. And then I always like to check in with alignment of the spine. So if you take your hands on top of your belly, your fingertips kind of brush your hip bones, and the heels of your hands or your thumbs feel your bottom two ribs. And then pull your hip bones up towards your bottom two ribs. So you'll get this pelvic tilt where you're starting to contract into the front line of the body, into the core, so that you're lengthening your lower back. So you're essentially going from a little bit of that curvature of the spine as you pull the hip bones up, that you're starting to take that out. Okay, so when we were in that heart opener, you might have felt it a little bit in the low back, and so this is just to help with that. Okay, so options with supported bridge. Feet can be planted and knees bent. You can take the extended variation. You can take it one leg at a time. One leg extends out, the other stays planted, so you have a little bit more of that support, or you can take both feet. Now when you come into this, there might be a little bit more arcing in the low back, so make sure to still continue to draw hip bones up towards ribs, or you might even have to adjust yourself so that the block or pillow is closer towards the sacrum as opposed to on the vertebra. Okay. Final variation, you can also take supported waterfall. So this is going to be really restorative for the legs, especially if you've been sitting a lot. So feet up into the air. Hands can just land wherever's comfortable in any of these poses. So it might be over top of the belly, down beside you. You could always cactus the arms overhead if you want to get into the chest a little bit more. But wherever you've landed, this should feel like a little bit of a release for the low back. Now, if you are in waterfall, you might feel a little bit of tingling in the legs. This is normal, but if it ever feels like too much, you can always just bend your knees into your chest and pause there for a little bit. Okay. So wherever you've chosen to land, really give yourself the permission to actually arrive in that shape. So often we come into these poses and we think we're ready to land in them, and then our mind is jumping elsewhere and our body is giving us these different signals. So really taking these first few breaths, even the first minute or so, to shift, to adjust, so that when we do choose to land in stillness, we have the space to just stay. And know that you always have agency here to change your mind if a certain pose isn't serving you, or to change the depth if it feels a little bit too much or a little bit too long. And then once you've found that place where you've started to settle into stillness, offer the same opportunity for your mind. Now your mind is just going to be at this easy flow of your breath. So it's not that the mind has to be completely still, it has to stop thinking. So actually drive yourself crazy trying to do that. But instead, just allowing it to be really fluid, really natural. So when thoughts come in, you can acknowledge them and then just simply allow them to flow out. So that there becomes a separation of the observer, you noticing the thought, and then the thought or the emotion that's coming up. So that could be the thought related to sensation in your body. It could be a thought that has to do with something that happened before this, or something that happened after, or will happen. It could even just be a thought of the present moment, of sounds around you, of musings of the mind, of the sensations. And when we just allow these thoughts of room to appear and then release, it gives us that space to be fully present for that next thought. So see if you can just practice that for a couple of breaths of just noticing your thoughts. So it's almost like you're an observer. So you don't have to fix or control or try to change the thought, just notice it. So this is mindfulness. This is the awareness of the present moment. And you might notice as you work through this practice that certain thoughts are really attention grabbing. So certain thoughts that we have will start to bring on other thoughts. So we'll notice something and then we'll have a judgment about that, which will bring us elsewhere. And it's almost this snowball effect where something so minute, so tiny, all of a sudden begins to consume our present moment. And so when you notice that, we like to refer to these as whirlpools of the mind or vrittis. And it's just simply our mind not being present. So we're falling into the past, or we're falling into the future, or even into our own perceived experience. So when you notice that, it's really easy to jump to judgment. And so instead, can you just simply acknowledge that you've wandered away from the present moment, and then take all of your attention back to your breath. Notice how your breath sounds. Notice how it feels from the outside in. So just starting with that movement of the rib cage, maybe of the belly, and then continually taking it deeper. So it's almost as though you could feel the expansion and contraction of the lungs and the diaphragm. And this is just a simple technique of redirection of when you get lost in a thought or in a story, or when those thoughts build, we call that a narrative, that you just simply begin to switch that to what's happening right here, right now, what's present, what's real. Okay. Now, if your legs are extended, you're going to begin to bend into your knees and take your knees into your chest. So whether your feet were on the floor or in the air, and then arms just wrap around tops of your shins or backs of your hamstrings. You might just gently rock side to side. Okay, so with this extra propping up of the hips, you're going to get a little bit more length into the low back. If you want to lengthen the hamstrings, you can always take the toes overhead into a plow shape, and we're just here for about 5 breaths. And so taking that extra bit of opening into the lumbar spine and maybe the back line of the legs as well. If your thighs are really close onto your belly, you might even be feeling that rise and fall of the breath as your chest and your belly press into the tops of your thighs, and you feel this lift, and then you feel this release. Now we'll come out of this pose the same way that we came in, so just gently, and you can do this one at a time if you'd like, place your feet onto your mat, pick up your hips, so you can shift your prop out from underneath, and then slowly you'll lower yourself onto your back again. Now it might feel nice to windshield wiper your knees over to the left and over to the right. And just washing out your hips. We spent a good deal of time on our back, so we're just gonna begin to shift to all fours. And take your time to get there. So you can roll over to your right hand side once again, and then when you're ready, you'll press yourself up. I always like tabletop to move through the spine, but if you prefer seated, that can also be nice. And you're just gonna shift. So you can take your hips side to side, you can drop your hips forward or back. Okay. And then if you are in a pregnancy, just being really mindful that you're not over expanding the belly, so that even when you come into those heart openers, it's a little bit less intense. And you're just kind of finding, especially restorative practices, somewhere that's a little bit more comfortable rather than looking for depth. We're gonna move to child's pose with the option to add in a opening for the backs of the shoulders in a twisted shape. So you can just take regular child's pose, and you can always add in props or bolsters underneath your belly or your head. This is a really restorative version, so you're not gonna feel as much sensation. If you wanna add in the twisted variation, before you lower all the way down, you'll just start to walk your hands out in front of you, and then you can thread your left shoulder underneath your body so that your bicep is almost coming underneath the nipple line, and then left shoulder to the ground. Now, I actually really like having a pillow underneath my cheek, so you can grab a pillow then. If this is a lot for your knees, pillows also behind the knees can be nice. You might need to fold a pillow or stack a couple of them. And so wherever you've chosen to land, just making sure that you are really comfortable there. Okay. If you have chosen to take that twisted variation, make sure you're walking your shoulder that's underneath the body away from your face. So you want it away from the ear so that it's actually more under the rib cage rather than underneath your neck. And so this is gonna get you into the rhomboids, those muscles between the spine, a little bit into the upper traps, and even a nice stretch for the sides of the neck. If you're just taking regular child's pose, you're still gonna be getting that opening, because it is a fold, in the back line of the body, so just along the spine. And the really key part of this is just to simply relax, okay? So that you're not feeling like you have to hold yourself up, that you can really let yourself sink down. And that means that your muscles aren't gripping to hold you here, that you can actually sink into the props. Know if you ever need to shift out of the twist, you can just come back to regular child's pose, or you can lift up through tabletop and take some movements and meet back in. So it's not so important that you have to stay in perfect stillness the whole time, but just about making sure that this practice is serving you. That's giving you space just to be with your thoughts. It's just giving you space to clear out anything that's lingering from last week or last year or even this morning. So you can just have some room to be present. And why this is really important is a present moment is really, really simple. The past, the future, they're complicated. Trying to predict things that we actually don't know how they're gonna turn out, or sitting with things that have a really big emotional attachment, or we wish could have gone a different way. Okay, all of those get really complicated. But what's right here, right now, your breath, your body, these sensations, the roof over your head, the clothes on your back, okay, all of that is really, really simple. It's tactile, you can touch it, you can feel it, it's here. And even the thoughts that are moving through of the present moment don't hold as much of that pull. So it's the past and future that hold the pull to draw you out of this connection with yourself and with what's happening right here. So when you notice that, just think of it as when you come back to your breath or the present moment, it's a gift. It is a gift of simplicity and space, especially in this busy world and busy time, to just simply be. Now, if you have taken the variation, we're going to switch sides. So your right hand is going to begin to slide towards your right shoulder and just slowly press into your hand to lift yourself away. Now, in either, if you're in traditional child's pose or you're taking the twist, you can always lift your hips away from your heels. You can take a little bit of movement through the spine if that's what you're craving. And you're just going to settle back into the other side. So this time, right shoulder threads underneath your body. Left arm just lands comfortably. So it might land extended forward. It might be wrapped around your pillow. It might be supporting your forehead. Make sure that you walk your right shoulder underneath the body so that there is that length through the top of the traps into the neck. And then really let your cheek rest heavy. So you're not using the muscles of your neck to try to hold your head up, that you trust your body just to sink into the pillow, into the ground. And if you noticed any frustrations coming up with these moments of stillness in your practice, of frustrations of trying to stay present, or with a wandering mind, or even just a sensation, these are the narratives. So these are the stories that we tell ourselves about our experience, rather than just allowing ourselves to experience it. So I encourage you on this side, see if you can move through this experience without having any labels. And it's going to be challenging. It's not meant to be easy. But just about feeling things without having to name them, or without having to judge them or having to label them, that we just simply feel something. And you could even use the word, if you do need a label, as interesting. So it's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It's just interesting. And we're just observing it without trying to categorize or put it into a little box. And so this is the practice of non-attachment. So just seeing things as they are without having to put words on those items, on those sensations, on those thoughts, on those feelings. So even if feelings or thoughts come up that you normally would say are negative or are bad or are unhelpful, is just to notice them. You just notice them and then let them pass. Because when you start to add those labels, you start to attach to that thought, to that feeling, and then we add even more and more labels, and we're actually getting sucked in to the draw of that emotional energy. And so when we just let things move through, we allow ourselves to stay present. So we're going to take a little bit of stillness and a little bit of silence just to practice this, to sit with our body, with our breath, with our thoughts, and just come back to the breath as often as you need to reset. When your thoughts are wandering, you've gotten stuck, you've started to land in judgment. Knowing that the breath is always there. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just calm your body by breathing deeply. And as you calm your body, offering the same amount of calm energy to your mind. Gently begin to bring your left hand, if you're in that twist, close to the body. And as you press into your left hand, you can unthread yourself. If you're in traditional child's pose, just slowly begin to peel yourself up. So you're coming into tabletop. Again, option to just create any shifts, almost like you're waking up from a deep sleep. So make it, if you are moving, really, really slow, really mindful. And then eventually you're gonna make your way onto your seat. So you can face whatever direction feels good for your body. It doesn't matter if you're to the side or forward. Okay. And just roll your shoulders a couple of times, especially if there was any lingering tension in there, that you just kind of move through that. And you can move in both directions if you'd like. We're gonna work into a little bit of the neck and down the tops of the traps. So these areas I find, especially with working at a desk and rolling forward, get really, really tense. Okay. So as you just kind of move through some of that tension in rolling the shoulders, you'll begin to settle your shoulders down your back and come to a comfortable seat. So that might be your legs crossed. You could butterfly the legs. You might just take the legs out in front of you. If legs crossed feels like a lot for the hips and your knees are high, this is where you can always just stack pillows to support the knees. Okay, so we're gonna take two different variations of this neck opener. Okay. So keeping your hands just onto your thighs or your knees for a moment so you can feel grounded. Take a full breath in and feel this lift from the ground up, like you're growing taller through the spine all the way to the top of the head, as though someone has a string and is pulling up. And then keep that length, and as you exhale, just sit your hips down towards the ground, so your sits bones into your mat. Take one more full breath in, grow a little bit taller. And then as you exhale, begin to pour your left ear over to your left shoulder. Okay. So what tends to happen over time, if our hands aren't rooted or in a shape, is we start to lift our shoulders up to our ears, and we're adding in that tension. So to keep the shoulders dropped, you're gonna keep your left hand here. Pick up your right hand and flip your palm away from your body. So it's almost like you're waiting for a high five. And then imagine that you're pressing your right hand into a wall. You're gonna begin to draw your hand away from you. So you're straightening out your right arm. Now I can't actually get my arm straight. I feel that kind of push back from the body, a little bit of sensation through the arm. And so you can just pause wherever that is. Now, your arm might be straight up from the shoulder, but you can also drop it a little bit. The more you drop it, the more you're gonna feel this into the tops of the traps. The more that you lift it, the more you're gonna feel this into the deltoid. So the kind of the outer edge of the shoulder or top of the upper arm. So you can kind of play with how low you're dropping the heel of your hand. Now this one can feel like a lot. So make sure that there's still a level of ease to the shape. Left ear drawing towards left shoulder, right hand extending, but fingers flexed up. So you're really getting into that inner line of the arm and then the outer edge of the shoulder. You let your eyes relax, eyes drop heavy. I'm going to be here for about 1 more minute or so. And we're going to stay with this lengthening through the right side of the neck. So that right arm, you're just going to slowly bend your elbow in. So you're taking your hand in towards you. And then take your left hand to your left cheek and just lift up through center for a moment. You see your right hand is dropped down. You can take your left hand onto your knee again. Lean to your left side so you can actually scoop your right hand underneath your body. So if your legs, if you want to straighten out the legs, that can also be nice. Your right hand is now underneath your sits bone, and you're once again going to take that same movement. This time we're just going to hold for about a minute. So you'll begin to drop your left ear over towards your left shoulder again. And then this time we're adding in movement. So you can take your chin down towards your armpit, turning your nose towards the ground, and then you can play with taking your nose up to the ceiling. Okay, so all of that length that we just found, we're now just fleshing this out, okay? So instead of having to hold in the shape, think about this as rinsing your body. Now, if you do feel that there's a certain area that's really tight and it just needs to be held and to be released, you are welcome to stay in stillness. But we're only going to be here for about 4 to 5 more breaths. Okay, allow the weight of your body to keep your hand rooted down. So bring your head back through center, so your ears over to your shoulder, and then once again, take your left hand to your cheek and press into the left side of your face to lift up so you can still keep these muscles relaxed. All right, release your right hand out from underneath. You can roll the shoulders a couple times, and you might feel that difference between the right and the left side. Okay, same thing on the other side. If you were in a cross-legged position, switch so that the opposite foot is in front. It's gonna feel a little bit sticky, but it's a pretty good reminder of how easy it is to fall in habits and how they start to affect the body. Okay. Once again, you're gonna take the arm out wide, but start by taking right ear over to your right shoulder. And then when you're ready, left hand will pick up, left palm faces out. You're just pressing that wall away. Okay, so your nose stays pointed forward, not to the ground, not to the ceiling. So the head is still straight, it's just tipped over in this lateral flexion. And then what the movement you can play with is how low you drop your left hand towards the ground. Okay, so it's gonna change the different sensation, and make sure as you're moving through this, there's no pain. Might be a little bit of tingling. So if you're starting to feel that and it's a lot of tingling, okay, just take your hand back in. You don't really want that sensation. It's gonna be hard to hold. So you're just looking for that deep, deep, deep stretch through the sides of the neck. Knowing that this isn't a long pose, can you even relax into your hip flexors, into your quads? Just relax your entire body. Almost feel like you're trying to go to sleep. And if it feels uncomfortable, also a good trick. If it feels uncomfortable to be seated, you can always sit up against a wall as well in this shape. This is a really great moment just to check in with those thoughts when the poses are a little bit more active or require more from us to stay in the pose and to stay in the stillness, in the mindfulness, is how much our body just wants to self-sabotage. So how easy our mind wants to jump to something and distract us. And so this is where breath becomes really, really important, especially as we come towards the end of this particular pose, is to just find your breath, notice it, just become very involved with your inhales and your exhales. All the while, maybe just noticing some of the environment around you, the temperature, the feeling of your clothing, any background sounds, even the sensations of your body. Last couple of breaths on this side. Well, you'll bend deeper into your left elbow, so you're drawing your hand in close, and you can just let your hand come towards the ground. Right hand will pick up your right cheek and lift you up through center. Okay, again, I always like to just take the legs a little different, so you can straighten the legs out or you can keep them crossed, up to you. But you'll lean towards your right hip and scoop the back of your left hand. So your palm is into the body and the back of your hand is on the ground. And then this is usually a pretty good way of just keeping the shoulder rooted down. Again, take that inhale to lift up and then begin to draw your right ear over. And this is where you can now take your nose and begin to turn your nose towards the ground, towards your armpit. You might lift your nose up. Just make sure as you're moving through this, it's really, really gentle. So it's almost like you're massaging out the fascia along this line of the body. And fascia being that connective tissue covering. just here for a few more breaths. So if you need to find somewhere you can stay and hold, you're welcome to. Otherwise, just continuing in movement, rinsing out that stickiness, that tension that exists in the shoulders. And then you'll bring your nose back towards center, so your ears to your shoulder, and then right hand picks up your right cheek again. And lean to your right side, pick out your left hand. You might just roll your shoulders once or twice. Here, we're gonna close off with an opening again for the chest, but it's gonna be a little bit more intense than our supported fish. Normally you can get into this on your belly. If you're pregnant, you can actually get into it on your side. So I'll show you both. So if you're coming into this on your belly, you're just gonna start to face the top of your mat, lower down. There's a couple options for the arms, so I'll go through those also later, but I like to start with cactus arms. So elbows are in line with your shoulders, fingertips point forward. And then you'll just gently press into so your left hand's gonna press beside your shoulder, and you'll roll yourself over towards your right hip. So that your right cheek, again, can be on the ground, or you can take a pillow underneath it. And that the front of your right shoulder and elbow are on the ground. Now, if you are pregnant, this is where I'll just come into this shape from fetal. So you'll just lift up and begin to slide your right arm back behind you. And then you can play with rolling a little bit more if you'd like. So it's just that you're not necessarily going right onto your belly. Make sure that wherever you have landed within this pose is comfortable, so that you're not, again, trying to hold yourself up, because you're gonna be tensing the muscles and you're actually adding tension rather than releasing it. Okay, legs in this shape really is up to each of you. So if you want to bend the knees, you want to straighten the legs, separate or stack, that you're just coming into a comfortable place. If you're feeling this a lot in the low back, it just means that there's a little bit maybe of twisting there. So you can always shift your hips a little bit more over to either side, or just come out of the twist of the spine as much. Now with the arms, now that you've been in this for a bit, just notice how this feels with cactus shape. You can always extend your right fingertips out so that your arm is more of a T shape with the body, or you can also diamond shape. So the elbow points out towards the side of your mat, but your fingertips, your right fingertips, point more towards the center. So you create a diamond shape with the arms, a square shape, or you just create a long line. So you're about halfway through this side. Can you find somewhere just to soften into, and somewhere that the sensation isn't so much that you can actually be present? You can just listen to your breath, feel the sensation without needing to distract via the mind to get us out of the physical discomforts of the body. I know that this is where a lot of the bargaining happens of, okay, I can just take 5 more breaths, or I can just do this, and we're trying to logic our way through it. So instead, can you just feel through this? Feel into your different senses of smell, taste, touch. Even if you need sight, you can open your eyes for a moment, collect on something, and then just let your gaze relax. Let's take 3 more breaths on this side. And then you'll slowly begin to roll more towards the ground. Now, if you're okay to go on your belly, you're welcome to just come back in where you are. If you were more in a fetal, you'll just press yourself up and then scoop your right arm underneath you so that you come into that fetal position again. If you're in fetal, you'll just roll to the other side, and you'll press yourself up to bring your left arm either out at an angle or cactus shape. If you're on your belly, you're just gonna simply switch, bringing your left cheek to your mat, left arm is cactus or extended out. Right hand plants beside your shoulder to roll yourself over towards that left hand side. Okay. So just last little bit of this practice, can you invite yourself to have some space so that you're really closing off with this time for you, rather than this being about trying to get somewhere, trying to figure things out, that you just simply get to land. You get to breathe, and you're essentially preparing yourself for that final and best part of the practice, the resting pose of Shavasana. Why so much of this practice has just been about noticing that we are the observer of our thoughts, of our sensation, of our experiences, and just to really step out of those patterns that we have fallen into for years of being in this unconscious state where we're just kind of moving through life, but we're not really aware that there's a separatedness of ourselves and of what we're experiencing. And I think when we find that, we also find this freedom to just simply be in that moment despite what's happening around us. I think especially right now with everything going on, we realize how uncontrollable our external circumstances, which gives us this opportunity to recognize how grounded and safe our internal circumstances can be when we recognize that we're just simply observing. So the things we're feeling, the thoughts we're going through don't hold any power over us, and that we have this agency to just choose what we want to let in, what we want to give attention to, where we want to hold space for the things that show up. So last couple of breaths, is there anything that you can just let go of to give yourself a little bit more room to come into Shavasana, just simply be and rest and give yourself a little bit of a break? So when you're ready, you'll either roll back towards your fetal or onto your belly. Okay. And you can just stay there for a moment, allowing your spine to reset, whether that's in either of those positions. If you are on your belly, it might feel nice just to gently wash your feet side to side, releasing the lumbar spine and sacrum. And we're just going to simply roll onto our backs. Okay, from either of those poses. It can feel nice to take knees into chest one final time and gently rock side to side. If you want to add in any support for the backs of the knees, this is also nice for low back, or you can come back into that supported bridge, or even how we started with pillows beneath your back, but just coming to a place of rest for these last couple of minutes. Okay. If you need to rock your head side to side or take any movements, just doing so that you can begin to settle into the shape, that you can begin to drop into this place. And take a couple of deep, full belly breaths. Even listening for the sounds of your inhales and your exhales. We'll just close off here, so I'll give you a few moments. There's no rush to get anywhere. I'll let you know when that time is up. And perhaps even just taking this time to wordlessly send some gratitude to your body for everything that it does for you, beyond just the physical landscape of activity, that your body allows you breath, it allows you consciousness, it allows you to experience the world through smell and taste and touch. And what a beautiful gift we really are given in that. And know that as you move through the rest of your day, you're worthy of this time, you're worthy of this space, and that it is really, really important to take that, to rest, to regenerate, and just stay here for a few more breaths in stillness and silence on my part. Now, if you need any final time here on your mat, you're welcome to take it. If you are ready to move and shift, you can just gently begin to wiggle into fingertips and toes. It might feel nice to take that big giant stretch overhead. You can take any movements your body is craving. And just when you're ready, you'll come up to seated. Truly, it's always such an honor to be able to teach for you guys. And I hope that this helps with the workload on the shoulders and neck, especially with being at a home office. So from the bottom of my heart, so much love, so much gratitude. Namaste.